We are previewing the Sunday and Monday night football games here on the Irish NFL show for week 4. For podcast listeners, this is part 4 of 4. You can check out the other 3 game preview segments on our other podcasts. We chop up each of the weekly predictions into 4 different segments, and you can find all of those on your podcast platform of choice each week as we record on Thursdays. In the late window, in the Sunday night window, we have the Pats at the Cowboys, Brian, in the first of those later games. Cowboys looking to bounce back after that, humiliating defeat from their perspective against the Cardinals, who've turned out to be a lot more competitive than people expected them to be. The Patriots, pretty much as we expected going into the season, very strong defensively. You can always trust Belichick to get them going right. They've had a couple of nice acquisitions there. Christian Gonzalez in the draft particularly seems to be performing well for them. And the Bill O'Brien offense, while it's been maybe a little bit slower to take off than we thought, certainly has been a lot more dangerous than what we saw from the lamentable Matt Patricia experiment last year. Is that going to be is that going to be something that's going to help them against the Cowboys? Are the Cowboys in a tough spot here and they drop a second one in a row, or do you see them coming back strong in Arlington?
I'll come to the game now. I just want to comment on Christian Gonzalez because we spoke in our live show in August around how much of a player he looked and the fact that he dropped so far down in the draft. You called it a couple of weeks ago like a baptism of fire going into the NFL. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith week 1, Tyreek Hill week 2, Garrett Wilson week 3, and this week, does it get any easier? It probably does. It's probably the easiest game, isn't it? CeeDee Lamb is not.
CeeDee Lamb is the worst receiver that Christian Gonzalez has had to mark. Yeah.
It sounds terrible to say that, but it probably is the case. Like, is he a true number 1? I mean, Cowboys fans would argue he is. In this game, I have been impressed with the Patriots despite the win last weekend because one, Mac Jones' numbers were very distorted because of the touchdown. Obviously, it was a 50-odd yard touchdown, and people were saying, "Oh, good numbers for Mac Jones." You take that touchdown out of the equation, his numbers, decline rapidly. And I thought the Patriots gave the Jets every opportunity to win that game last weekend. There was punt after punt, towards the end of the game. Even at the end, after the safety, which made it 15-10, they still managed to get the ball back with less than a minute to go. And they still, unfortunately, because of the Zach Wilson situation, they can't find a way to navigate a drive, with the exception of one big drive in the second half. In this game, you would expect the Cowboys offense to have the drives. They've had the drives last week, just couldn't turn it into touchdowns. At home, in Jerry's world, you would expect a reaction, both offensively and defensively, because Dak's had criticism this week. We touched on Tuesday, 1 of 5 in the red zone, 2 particular drives where no scores came in. And can the Patriots methodically go down? Like, this game, for me, strikes me as the Patriots will have to have these long, methodical drives, keep the clock moving, keep it low scoring, and put themselves in a position come the fourth quarter. I find it very difficult to see that's the case. It strikes me as that game 2 weeks ago against the Dolphins, that the Dolphins ran out with comfortable winners in the end by double digits. Cowboys on Sunday, the rebound. Patriots, for me, are a concern. They're not doing anything to kind of excite me. Defensively, they'll hold you in the games, but offensively, they don't have enough for me.
Yeah, I think the Patriots they're in that zone just above league average, right? They're probably a lot better defensively than most teams, but they're really limited by Mac Jones, as you said. Colin often talks about the Broncos being in orange purgatory and the Vikings being in purple purgatory. The Patriots are in their own version of that at the moment. Mac Jones's floor may have been relatively low, at least in his first season, although arguably has dropped a little bit since then. But the ceiling is very low too. Like even your best version of Mac Jones isn't really going to be enough, particularly in the AFC as it is now, to get you anywhere meaningful. And for the Cowboys, as you say, red zone performance has been awful. Dak rightly getting question marks. But the Cowboys, in terms of execution, 9 penalties for over 100 yards last week. That just can't happen. It can't be allowed to happen. And frankly, I don't think it's going to happen 2 weeks in a row. I think it's a Cowboys win at home. I don't see a way for the Patriots to navigate victory here. I don't think they're going to get blown out or anything close to it. But I just don't see how they're going to navigate their way to a victory in this one. Sunday night football, we have Chiefs at Jets. Looks like Taylor Swift will be there in the Meadowlands, cheering on Travis Kelce. We got the full discussion for anybody who listens to the New Heights podcast, to the Kelce brothers chopping it up about how Travis met Taylor. Maybe Brian should at least take the attention away from Zach Wilson. He'll certainly be open, so God love him.
I listened to another podcast today in which they said the Jets have brought in Trevor Siemian, And inevitably, after 3 more weeks of this, Trevor Siemian will start. But the problem is they need a backup plan to Trevor Siemian because he can't keep fit. And what happens then? Because if Zach Wilson is removed from the team, you cannot, for the third time, surely, go back to Zach Wilson if Trevor Siemian is to come in and not leave it up, and they have to revert back to the original plan.
Why did they let go of Mike White? I still don't understand that. I mean, he was decent for them, or certainly a lot better than Zach Wilson was last season.
Free agent and picked up within 24 hours of free agency start. And I remember actually Colin saying to me, Mike White has been signed. Like, we wait for all, like, we're going away from the game, but you get to free agency, the tampering period, you might as well call it the start of free agency. All these deals are done per sources within like 12 hours. And Mike White was one of the first ones to be done. And people go, oh, that's an interesting one. Because obviously the Dolphins were keen to make sure they got a really strong backup in. He comes in last week and lights it up for the fourth quarter when it was garbage time stuff. And the Jets lose him. And they got Tim Boyle, who can't really run around. There's no backup plan. It will be Trevor Siemian. Look, for this game, you saw what the Chiefs defense did last week on Justin Fields. And what I would say is, the Chiefs defense isn't probably top 5 in the league, and they still find their ways to put themselves in a position to be really good during the playoffs. And Spagnuolo always has them ready at the back end of the season. Start of the season, they tend to start slowly. But what they do is they beat up on bad quarterbacks and bad offenses. And we saw a struggling offense last week in the Bears. And right now, the Jets offense is struggling. And this is what's going to happen on Sunday again. I think Chiefs will have a nice, easy even. Unless there's one of those weird evens like last year in week 4 where the Colts somehow with Matt Ryan beat the Chiefs because the Chiefs had so many inconsistent plays and gave the ball away. That's the only way I see it. It's down to Chiefs having the errors as opposed to the Jets beating them. But for me, Chiefs come out of this. And it's a shame in a way because we spoke about all these great games on prime time, and now the flexing is coming in soon, and the Jets are not likely will be flexed out of Sunday Night Football when so many games were put in for the Aaron Rodgers love affair. And this was another one, obviously. They expected Aaron Rodgers to be going up against Mahomes. Not to be. Chiefs all day for me.
Yeah, 100%. You took the words right out of my mouth on both counts there. This is a game that we expected to take a very different complexion, and for Aaron Rodgers to be the star attraction rather than Taylor Swift in the stands. Unfortunately, it hasn't turned out that way. Football is the poorer for it. I do think it's funny, and you kind of touched on it there a little bit, because of what happened last season, and they've absolutely earned this to their credit, the Chiefs. The entire NFL media industrial complex gives the Chiefs an absolute pass in the way that other teams get pulled apart over the start of the season and concerns. We talked about the Eagles. We talked about other teams who don't look quite as good, the Bengals in particular, because of the Burrow injury, of course. But the Chiefs, doesn't matter what they do over the first half of the season, everybody's just going, yeah, they'll be grand, they'll be grand, they'll be grand. It's the Chiefs, and they don't get the same level of analysis. So even though they haven't been amazing, although Patrick Mahomes is playing quietly, if that's possible, out of his mind. I mean, he just seems to have challenged himself to take it to a new level. You know, we saw it when Kelsey was out. We see it sometimes. We see him at his best in a losing effort, because there is nothing he won't try. There's no lengths to which he won't go to try and make something happen. And nobody has such an extravagant set of gifts to do it as he does. You know, it's kind of been. We've almost become complacent about it and taken it for granted, but it's just such an amazing thing to watch. You really have to drink it in. I mean, I had this horrible thought when I was watching them take the Bears apart. I thought, you know, I'm actually glad that Ryan Pace screwed up and didn't draft Patrick Mahomes, because the Bears would have broken Patrick Mahomes. Like, the thought of Patrick Mahomes stacking shelves in Walmart because he washed out of the NFL because he went to the Bears is just too painful to take. I'm so glad it worked out the way it worked out, even though it's not done anything for the Bears. They didn't deserve him, and they wouldn't have gotten out of him what Andy Reid has got out of him. I think we got exactly what we wanted as football fans there, and I think that's going to be plenty for the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. I just don't see there's anything the Jets can do. We've talked about how that, you know, caliber defense that they had maybe was going to be able to slow down a couple of the offenses that they face and keep them in games, but that hasn't proven to be the case. You know, they couldn't even get it done against the Patriots last week, and you know, you got to say that there's very little hope of there being any improvements to the level that's going to be required to do what needs to be done against the Chiefs. I think that's a fairly obvious win for Kansas City there.
So just one more final point on that. Like, if the Jets defense was with us, and you can see this week there's been a lot of frustration from the Jets defense in particular, that the head coach is continuing to support Zach Wilson, because they're looking at it from the cold eye today saying, whilst the Patriots offense isn't great, we held them to 15 points and we still lose the game. You know, it's a difficulty. Yeah, but, they're probably thinking they can hold Mahomes to 21, 24. And, realistically now, if you hold them to 22 years, you're not going to win the game. So there's probably huge frustration. That's why it's going to come to a boiling point at some stage where it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, no, entirely agree. And look, we talked about this right at the start of the season. Aaron Rodgers, a 39-year-old quarterback, like obviously nobody would have predicted in their worst nightmare that you'd have an injury as serious as the one that he suffered after 4 snaps of the season. But the likelihood of him missing at least some games was very high at the age he's at. He's the oldest player in the league. So the chance of Zach Wilson playing at least a handful of games and potentially meaningful games, depending on how the race was going, was pretty high. There was a pretty high probability there. This is a really poor job in the front office, a really poor risk mitigation job. When, as we were saying, they had Mike White. There's something different they could have done here. They decided to ride with Zach Wilson. It's like they just won't admit that he's a bust. They won't admit that they screwed up there and drafted him as high as they did. Much as though we criticized the 49ers for the draft capital they gave up for Trey Lance and for kind of bailing on him. They made the decision quickly and ruthlessly, got it out there, took the loss on it, and moved on. With Zach Wilson, it's become sunk cost fallacy for the Jets, and it's really, really costly, as you say. And I think it's caused this schism in the locker room that is going to undermine their efforts and could have much more serious repercussions if they don't address it very, very quickly. Right, moving on to the Seahawks and Giants in Monday Night Football to round it up here. This is a great looking game, Brian. How are you feeling about your Giants going into this one?
I often say at an early stage of the season that sometimes a team wins because they really need to win and they desperately have to win. And sometimes a desperate team just finds a way to win it more. And there's no kind of rationale as to why that happens. We've seen it many a time. When a team really needs to get that win, they just somehow pull it off. And that's how I feel about this game for the Giants, because probably looking a little bit too far down the road, but the following week they're away in Miami. Right now with Miami, that's a difficult task. And the following week they're on the road in Buffalo. So you got 2 road games against the AFC East, the 2 leading contenders in the AFC East. Then obviously kind of eases slightly with the Commanders, and then the Jets, as it happens, maybe a little bit an easier game than first thought when the schedule came out. But if you go 1-3 and then you go 1-4 and then you go 1-5, the skids are on and people start getting the pressure beyond the head coach and the quarterback. Not in terms of anybody losing their job or anything, but around the expectation that people had for this team going into the season. That's why I think they'll win. They're actually getting a lot of players back. There was a lot of players missing from the 49ers game that even if they were playing against the 49ers team, would they have won? Unlikely. But they're getting 3 guys back on the offensive line. Looks like Barkley may play after all. Some of the defensive players that were struggling about 11 days to recover. Seattle, they've been quite strong the last 2 weeks, but I think the Giants navigate a victory because ultimately I think it comes down to they have to get this one. And sometimes when you really need it, you just find a way. And that for me doesn't have any, it probably doesn't no logic or rationale, but we've been here before. I think the Giants somehow get over the line.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm leaning the other way, though, I have to say. I think the Seahawks will just about do it here. They're banged up, and I have question marks about them going in there. They're one of the more injured teams in the league heading into this one, although it's looking like they may, at time of recording, get Tariq Woolen back. That would be a big boost for them. We saw the running game show up in force last week, and Zach Charbonnet had the NFL Angry Run of the Week award this week, and it's one of the best ones you'll ever see. Like, that defender just gets bounced out of bounds as he goes in for the touchdown. He really was feeling it on that play. You talk about the Giants really needing to have it, and there is sometimes an animal ferocity that comes into it when that's the case. You don't see the Seahawks backing down from that challenge, though.
No.
They're of all teams, they're very much in that NFC West race. Even though, as we say, the Rams have been a bit more competitive than we'd have expected. The 49ers, the obvious front runners there, but it's arguable they don't need it any less than the Giants do if they're going to stay in that very competitive division.
Pete Carroll won't be concerned about that element.
No, not at all. Giants defense has been a big disappointment for me heading into the season. I expected a lot better from them. I thought they made a couple of good pickups, and I thought they'd be in better shape than they have been. Now, having said that, and this is the one thing that we always find it tricky to figure out as the season goes, you're making these prognostications after only seeing 2 and 3 games and just assuming the teams will stay at that level for the rest of the season. That's not the way it goes. Well-coached teams improve. They diagnose, they flex things, they move things around, they bring different players in, they get better, and they fix the roof as they go. And I do think that the Giants will do that. I do think over the course of the season we'll see a more consistent Giants defense than we have seen to date. I'm not so sure that happens right away. I think that takes time, and I think the Seahawks will win this one. I see them coming out the right side of it. Right, that is our week 4 preview. That's all the games run down now. As we said, it's the last time for a while. We're going to have 16 full games, so enjoy it while it lasts. We're on the bye week next week, which will give us obviously more time to focus in our week 5 preview this time next week. A reminder to anyone listening by podcast that we divided up into 4, so you have 3 other podcasts of the week 4 predictions coming your way wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you very soon.